Good afternoon, dear colleagues. In our review of reforming process, were several times underscored that there are some institutional changes in place which mark the beginning of reforms, and in this context we mentioned the free legal aid centers. Today we have Andriy Vishnevsky, director of this network of centers. He will inform us about the intention behind the establishment of these centers and will describe how they work and explain why the centers are important for the progress of reforms, in particular when people try to find the implementation of their rights. I believe that this reform is really important for Ukraine. Thank you, Taras. I would like to remind you that the commitment to establish local centers for free secondary legal aid was made by Ukraine as a member of the Council of Europe. There was a special resolution in which we made this commitment. In line with this resolution, we had to provide the free legal assistance to the unprotected people who are unable to pay money for such legal aid. Unfortunately, for almost 20 years, we failed to create this network of centers, and only now, from July 1st, we have started establishing such network of centers, legal aid centers. We have 100 centers. Each of them serve to the territory comprising between 300 and 700,000 people, and it guarantees representation in court in civil and administrative cases. So who are liable to such, who are eligible to these services, those whose income amounts to not more than 2 living wages, also ATO participants and their families, family members of the those servicemen who were killed, children without parental care, and children who are victims of violence in families or who potentially can be such victims. These centers follow the client-oriented approach, and we from the very beginning, we accept all people. From the very beginning, we do not ask a question whether this person is eligible for the secondary legal aid. We start from defining the problem of this or that person. Sometimes people do not need to go to court. Quite often they need very simple step-by-step algorithm how they should act. For example, to get pension, to get a subsidy, or how to act to receive fees after parental fees after divorce. And also we provide advice to those people who have some claims to the state borders, public administration borders. And in those cases, the lawyers of our services will represent interests and protect the rights of such vulnerable people in local courts. Now you can ask me how independent lawyers' approach could be guaranteed under the circumstances when this is paid by the state. We work with independent lawyers. Unlike in some other countries, in Anglo-Saxon law system countries, for example, they have the state lawyers. We do not have such a category of lawyers. We just have lawyers who have a license for the legal activity, court activity, and for each such a lawyer, participation in free legal assistance is offered on a voluntary basis. We believe that voluntary approach is very important for the quality of services. Each lawyer may decide whether he or she is interested in providing such services. Each center decides what will be the workload on the lawyers, and we base our services at two basic principles: the voluntary basis for the lawyers and the free access to supply of such services. When we say that this is free aid, we mean that it is free for the clients, for unprotected people, but it does not mean that this legal aid is provided on free basis by the lawyers. We have the list of criteria, and the lawyers have to we have the list of criteria for the service, and if the lawyers comply with this list of criteria, they are paid. I think that we should mention that when it is about subsidies, about awarding the status of ATO participant, pensions, etc., we should state that all those topics are covered by these free aid centers, and they have the right to and they have capacity to advise whether you complied, whether people complied with all the rules, whether they can file to court if they believe that their interests were not taken into account. We believe you are right. We believe that this platform will allow to unite the efforts of all NGOs dealing with the same categories of population to whom we are providing free secondary legal aid. Sometimes those NGOs provide primary legal aid. That is, they provide information, allow access to information, they provide psychological assistance, rehabilitation programs, etc. Some NGOs deal with the ATO participants, some deal with the women, female victims of family violence, and we plan to develop partnership with such organizations in order to exchange mutually necessary information. On the other hand, to ensure better coordination and better protection of the victims. That is, if some NGO have a client to whom they provide primary legal aid or some information who is victim of violence or ATO participant, and they see that the case of this person requires filing to court, suing to court, then they may involve us. And vice versa. If we see that a person needs rehabilitation, we may address to such organizations. On the other hand, such centers allow better development of local communities, and under today's conditions, when we are undergoing decentralization reform, we should promote community development this way, because otherwise we will create obstacles for enjoyment of rights at the local level. And with this, on the basis of this broad local partnership, we will raise the capacity of local communities and carry out our mission. We believe that we should create equal opportunities for everybody and an opportunity to resolve the vital issues at a fair basis. Andriy, maybe those people who are interested in such aid, they now can see us here. So what steps they should follow to get access to your assistance? And the second question, how your program is funded, whether from donor funds or from state resources. And of course, the financial resources are very important. Due to the government effort, the funding of this project had raised 5 times during the last 2 years. As of today, we have 269 million for this year. 123 are allocated for the coverage of lawyers' work, and all the rest is allocated for material supply, that is all sorts of equipment like computers, copiers, because we have to copy the documents. Also, the lawyers are able to use these equipped facilities of our centers when they deliver their services. As for the international technical aid, sponsorship is also considerable, and their funds amount up to 20% of our annual expenses for this year. We are supported by Canada, Denmark, the USA, and one of the biggest of our donors today is the government of Canada. They have allocated 9 million of Canadian dollars for 4 years to establish and develop this center's payment for the staff, or repair and overhaul of the premises, etc. They are done on the account of the state budget of Ukraine. The funds from technical assistance are used for training of personal training of lawyers, for information dissemination, for communication services, social advertising, etc. And the expenses of this type. As for the
approach the center, first we have the 24 hours around the clock hotline 0800. It was created specifically to get the information from the police about the detention in order to provide the detainees the legal assistance immediately. But since July the 1st, the same phone number can be used by any person to obtain the information where, how they can get this legal assistance and what kind of assistance we offer. We try to maximum extent simplify the access to this legal assistance. I can say that this is the simplest world over, because we still are working on the further extension of our legal assistance. I aim to try to make it more digital, but it's enough. It's sufficient to bring the ID or some document which will confirm your status. If you're talking about the pensioner's certificate, if you're talking about the combat actions participants in the specific military document. If a person needs a kind of the secondary legal assistance based on the low income, we have to bring the paper about the incomes of this family, of this person, or if this person already approached some of the social services, it would be enough for us a copy of the decision made by the previous service, and in this case, this person should not get another document once again. So we are cooperating with the Minister of Social Policy and the specific profile ministry in order to get the information from their registers, which would confirm the level of the incomes of this or another citizen. In this case, we can, let's say, reject the name, let's say, refuse from the need or requirement to get the special documents from the clients. It will take some time, but starting next year, we believe we resolve this question. Thank you. We have another question. Ukraine Crisis Media Center, the kind of specification. First of all, how many lawyers do you have in your network? What kind of competition contest you had? You're talking about 100 centers, how they're distributed region by region. Thank you for your question. Today, we have about 5,000 lawyers who were selected based on the results of the 7 contests. The first one took place at the beginning of 2012, and since then, twice a year, we have on a regular basis such competitions, the contests, and definitely we'll need more the lawyers. Today we have enough of those to start our work. The competition, the contents is like that. First of all, we verify the lawyers' papers and documents. Then the second stage, this anonymous testing for their knowledge of the laws or legislation which is required to provide the secondary legal service. And the third stage is individual interview. We have a special scale of points, so we have the objective system of calculating those points. If a lawyer collects a certain number of those points, which is over the certain thresholds, he or she can sign the contracts for providing such kind of assistance. Regarding the number of the centers, we cover the whole territory of Ukraine. 100 centers are distributed in such a way. In the million-strong population city in Kyiv, we have 4, in Kharkiv 3, in Odessa 3, in Lviv 2. In each region, there are several centers as well. For example, in the Kyiv region, we have center in Vishnevsky, in Belotserkva, in Borispol. In Kharkiv region, they have the centers in Krasnograd, Lavki, Lozova, Kupiansk, and Izum. So, speaking in principle, we proceed, well, I already mentioned that we took into consideration the criteria of the number of population and the transport infrastructure, so that ideally we would have the distance maximum 40 or 50 kilometers from the center to everyone. Unfortunately, not always we manage to achieve that, because in Odessa, it's a big region. We have some cases when they have 120 kilometers from the center. But I believe we have enough conditions in order to launch this project, and what we can allow ourselves the luxury to launch it today within the amounts of those resources which I mentioned before. In the future, I do have no doubts that the government will continue continue to support our initiative, and we are going to increase the network or expand the network of such centers. Any more questions? If none, once again, thank you very much. We are going. This brings us to the end of this briefing. Come again with the news how those centers operate all over the territory of Ukraine. Our next briefing will take place at 2 p.m. sharp. Thank you.
Нічого страшного. Під софітами жарко дуже.